So let's dive right into this by asking a very direct question. When was the last time you truly unplugged? I mean, really unplugged. I want you to take just a second, then reflect on your own screen time today. How are you breathing right now? Is it shallow? Are you taking deep breaths? And what is your current level of daily fatigue like? Because if you're feeling chronically exhausted, distracted, or just generally overwhelmed, I want to immediately validate those feelings for you. You are not imagining it, and it absolutely isn't a personal failure. As we're about to see in this explainer, there is a profound, scientifically proven reason why modern life feels so draining, and it all comes back to our biology. Welcome to today's explainer, where we're going to be exploring what we call the nature cure. We're going to unpack this massive biological mismatch between the modern, chaotic cities we live in and the ancient brains we're still operating with. But more importantly, we're going to look at the hard, peer-reviewed science behind the healing power of the forest and how simply reconnecting with the natural world can literally alter our neurochemistry, boost our immune systems, and totally restore our mental focus. But, to understand the cure, we really first have to understand the disease. And the root of it is a concept called technostress. Now, this isn't some new buzzword. It was actually coined way back in 1984. It basically describes the unhealthy behavior and chronic environmental stress caused by our continuous connection to technology. Just think about how many times a day you switch between emails, phone notifications, and, 5 different screens. This constant, fragmented demand on our attention leads directly to mental fatigue, irritability, insomnia, and anxiety. We're continually connected to our devices, for sure, but we are totally disconnected from our natural state. And the reason our brains are so unbelievably tired actually comes down to how we spend our attention. According to something called attention restoration theory, which was developed by environmental psychologists Rachel and Stephen Kaplan back in the 1980s, our brains rely on 2 completely different kinds of attention. Modern life demands what they call directed attention. That's the intense, really draining focus we use for problem solving, staring at screens, and filtering out city noise. It just tires the brain right out. On the flip side, we have soft fascination. This is triggered by natural environments, like watching clouds drift, listening to flowing water, or just seeing leaves move in the wind. Soft fascination requires literally no effort. It restores the brain, completely allowing our directed attention to rest and reset. Honestly, this exhaustion makes perfect sense when you zoom out and look at our evolutionary history. This is the root of that biological mismatch I mentioned earlier. Just look at how we've spent our time on Earth as a species. For 95% of human history, during the Paleolithic era, we lived out in the wilderness as hunter-gatherers. Our bodies and brains evolved to survive in that wild, natural environment. Then, for about 5% of our history, the Neolithic era, we lived with domesticated nature, so farming and agriculture. But the urban and industrial era, where nature is basically absent, that represents less than 1% of our entire evolutionary history. We are biologically wired for the wild, but we've suddenly trapped ourselves in concrete. We evolved for the wilderness, not for sitting in ergonomic chairs staring at glowing rectangles all day. And the really crucial point here is that this disconnect is only accelerating. Since the year 2000, we officially became an urban species. And consider this staggering number, 75%. By the year 2050, it's projected that 75% of the global population, which will be around 9 billion people, are going to live in cities. We are moving further and further away from our evolutionary home, and that is exactly what's driving up the rates of lifestyle-related non-communicable diseases. Which brings us to a really beautiful concept called the biophilia hypothesis. It was coined independently by psychologist Erich Fromm and later expanded by the biologist E.O. Wilson in 1984. Biophilia literally means love of life. Wilson defined it as our innate tendency to focus upon life and affiliate with it emotionally. And this completely validates your exhaustion in the city and your craving for a weekend getaway to the mountains. Our love for nature isn't just some cultural preference. It is a deep-rooted genetic inheritance. Early humans who paid attention to natural cues survived, so that awareness is literally woven into our DNA. Because of that deep-rooted DNA, our brains are still interpreting the modern world through a very ancient lens. Jagged, chaotic, urban environments filled with traffic and sharp angles act as threat signals to our nervous system. They keep us on high alert all the time. But natural geometry, like those specific fractal patterns we find in trees, clouds, and water, they act as immediate safe signals. The moment our eyes take in these natural patterns, our brain automatically tells our parasympathetic nervous system to relax. We are literally hardwired to feel safe in the woods. recognizing this profound need for nature, a really fascinating practice emerged in Japan back in 1982, championed by researchers like Dr. King Lee. It's called Shinrin-yoku, which translates to forest bathing. Now, this obviously doesn't involve literally bathing in a tub out in the woods. It means bathing in the forest atmosphere, or taking in the forest through our senses. It was actually developed as an accessible medical and spiritual antidote to the intense technostress and overwork, a phenomenon known there as karoshi that was plaguing Japanese urban workers. So how exactly do you bathe in a forest? Well, it's all about intentionally bridging that gap between yourself and the natural world. Visually, you take in the forest landscapes. Studies actually show that just seeing the color green fundamentally relaxes the human brain. You actively listen for the calming effects of birds singing or water flowing. You breathe in the natural fragrance of the trees and flowers. For touch, you can literally touch the bark of a tree or just feel the atmosphere on your skin. And of course, you deeply breathe in that incredibly fresh, clean forest air. It's supposed to be a completely immersive sensory experience. If you want to try this out yourself, it really just requires some intention. It starts by leaving the phone behind. Just unplug entirely. Once you're unplugged, you just walk slowly and aimlessly while breathing deeply. This isn't a strenuous hike or cardio workout. It's purely about being present and engaging those five senses to connect with the trees around you. Dr. Lee notes that while spending 2 hours in the forest is optimal for deep restoration, even just 20 minutes can significantly revitalize your mind and body.
Now here is where things get really fascinating. The practice has evolved so much. We are officially moving from the poetry of just feeling good in the woods to rigorous, evidence-based biology. In 2004, Japanese researchers set out to gather hard empirical data on exactly why Shinrin-yoku works, and this led to the establishment of an entirely new interdisciplinary science called forest medicine. It's essentially preventative medicine focused on exactly how the forest environment chemically and physiologically impacts human health. And the absolute superstar discovery of forest medicine is something called phyticides. Have you ever noticed that the forest just smells incredibly good and clean? Well, what you're actually smelling are volatile organic substances. They're essentially wood essential oils like alpha-pinene and limonene that are actively released by trees and plants to protect themselves from insects and rot. By releasing these oils, trees are actively filtering and improving the air quality all around them. When we walk in the forest, we are literally breathing in that purified air and these phyticides. It's like natural aromatherapy, but with powerful medical effects.
Okay, here is where the science gets truly incredible. Clinical studies have proven that breathing in these phytoncides significantly increases the activity and the number of natural killer, or NK, cells in the human body. NK cells are a type of white blood cell that basically act as our immune system's rapid response team, defending our bodies against bacteria, viruses, and even tumor formations. Furthermore, forest bathing actually increases the intracellular levels of anti-cancer proteins. The forest is actively boosting your immune system just by you being there and breathing its air. But it goes way beyond just the immune system. The forest completely rewires our nervous system state. The urban grind keeps our sympathetic nervous system constantly engaged, and that's our high-stress fight-or-flight mode. But simply being in a forest environment significantly drops that sympathetic activity and cranks up our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and recover mode. The natural sights, the green colors, the sounds of water, they all signal to the brain that it is finally safe. Because of that parasympathetic shift, the physiological benefits are honestly undeniable. Forest exposure acts as a system-wide reset. It actively lowers your blood pressure and your heart rate while drastically reducing stress hormones like adrenaline and noradrenaline in your body. It even clears out mental fatigue, reducing anxiety and depression. This makes forest medicine a profoundly powerful, evidence-based, preventative measure against lifestyle-related, non-communicable diseases like hypertension and heart disease. When we look at the long-term impact on our stress levels, researchers found something pretty startling. People living in high-density concrete environments with no nature displayed what's called a flattened cortisol profile. Their stress hormones basically stayed artificially high all day long, which is a clinical sign of chronic environmental stress. But people living in green, biophilic environments showed a healthy, rhythmic decline in cortisol throughout the day. Just having visual access to trees acts as a passive regulatory system for your stress hormones. This restorative power was famously documented by an environmental psychologist named Roger Ulrich. He discovered that hospital patients actually recovered faster from surgery and required less pain medication if their hospital bed had a window looking out at trees compared to patients who were just looking at a brick wall. This is known as stress recovery theory. It proves that even just visual access to nature accelerates physical healing and emotional balance. But look, Let's be real for a second. We can't all just move to a cabin in the middle of a forest. Our future is urban. So how do we solve this? Enter biophilic design. This is an architectural and scientific philosophy aimed at creating artificial environments, so our offices, schools, and homes that actually mimic nature. The goal is to stimulate our innate biophilia and fight off nature deficit disorder by bringing the healing elements of the outside world inside. And to be clear, biophilic design isn't just about throwing a potted plant on your desk and calling it a day. It's deeply intentional. It means designing spaces with abundant natural light to help set our body clocks, and bringing in indoor greenery and water features to provide that soft fascination and lower our cortisol. It's about surrounding ourselves with natural, non-synthetic materials like wood finishes that soothe the brain, and designing spatial layouts that satisfy our ancient survival instincts by offering both prospect, so a clear view of the room, and refuge, which is a feeling of safe shelter. So as we wrap up this explainer, we really arrive at a profound realization. Protecting our wild natural spaces is not just an environmental issue anymore. It is quite literally a public health imperative. We are biologically tied to these ecosystems. The phytocytes we need to boost our immune systems, the fractal patterns we need to soothe our anxious minds, they come from the forest. Preserving nature is a biological and psychological necessity for humanity's survival. Basically, protecting the forests means protecting ourselves. So, your crucial takeaway for today is simply this. You are wired for the wild. Your techno-stress is completely real, but the cure is waiting right outside. I want to leave you with this final thought and a bit of a challenge. Will you step outside, look away from this screen, find a patch of green, and reclaim your evolutionary home today? Remember, even just 20 minutes can completely change your brain. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will see you next time.